welcome to share.
the lake house in Vermont. He's so nice.
Today's the last.
From the United States, so we could all meet. Yeah, she brought him to the States with all family.
It's the last class. Isn't today the last class?
Yes.
Hmm?
Last class.
That's how it was.
No, the last class for this month, and I think there is no classes in January.
You've been there, it's here, it's
Are you asking or are you telling me? There's no class next week.
kind of like.
I think today is the last class, but I don't know if there's no more classes till January.
Well, we will know.
This is the last class of the month, and then the next class will be on the 6th.
Okay, thank
So
you.
what did the person
You're welcome.
January 6th, we'll start again. Today's the last class.
Today's the last class?
Ron, will you just give me co-host so I can share my screen at some point? Please.
You are a co-host to share. You will be able to share.
Perfect.
Is there another continuation of this class? No.
No, today's the last day.
It is the last.
And then we, what?
Rabbi Greg is doing it and
Yeah.
But that's in January,
I know.
January 6th.
Yeah,
Okay, who
wait.
doesn't have the book?
What for?
Great.
Almost
So-
all of that.
Take one and pass it and then and then we'll get started. And for those online, I have the online PDF to share my screen, so you will have it as well.
When are you doing teaching that time, like your own class?
Hopefully in the spring.
Oh, good.
So I just want to introduce myself. Hi, everyone. If we haven't met yet, I am Rabbi Shira Bachman, and Rabbi Laila couldn't be here today, so I am subbing in for this last class of yours. I've heard very positive things about this course, that you guys have really enjoyed the book. Donniel Hartman is an incredible, inspiring hero of mine, honestly. I really love his works. For my thesis on Jewish peoplehood, I actually read one of his books called A Heart of Many Rooms that I'd also really recommend. It's a really great book. And so I was excited when I heard that this was the course teaching. And so what I did is Rabbi Laila instructed me to choose a chapter that speaks to you, and teach on it and do some reading and questioning and open up discussion. So that is the plan. The chapter that I chose is, you have the book, okay, is chapter 11. The title of the chapter is Israel's relationship with world Jewry. Let me get the one online pulled up so everyone online can see it. Okay. Everyone online can see that? Give me a thumbs up. Yes. Okay, awesome. So actually, before we start with this, everyone has what they need? Okay. Before we start, I want to begin with a story that really just happened yesterday. That kind of will bring us into this conversation about Israel's relationship with world Jewry, but really diaspora, right? Diaspora meaning any Jew who lives outside of Israel. So I have a lot of really good friends and family that live in Israel. And one of my friends, Dor, who's around my age, he sent me a message yesterday. And he says, Ashira, I've been wondering this for a very long time. And every year I forget to ask the question, but I really want to learn. I want to understand. He goes, why in the United States and outside of Israel, people call the lamp that you use to light the Hanukkah, they call it a menorah. But it's really a Hanukkah. And is it just that they've been using that term for so long that, it's too far past to do the education of that it's a Hanukkah and not a menorah? Or is there another reason? He goes, because in Israel, there's the education that the symbol of Israel is a menorah, the one with seven branches, whereas a Hanukkah has 9, right? 4 on each side and 1 in the middle. So we had a whole conversation back and forth about this. And I said, one, I think the first point that he made is that it's kind of too far past, right? We've gotten so used to calling it a menorah. But the second thing is we're really not wrong, because menorah at the end of the day means lamp. right? So it is a Hanukkah menorah, right? So, but just this back and forth, I think, is a tribute to our discussion today. That the education and the traditions and customs that are so embedded in Israeli society look a little different outside of Israel. And Israelis, both Israelis and diaspora Jews, so sometimes have these reactions to each other. Wait, why do you do that? Isn't it supposed to be this way? Right? And we could go on and on about so many examples of the differences between our practices and our traditions and customs inside Israel and outside Israel. So that was kind of to frame our discussion. We're going to get more deep into the weeds about the discussion through the reading, but that was just a light way to spark the beginning of this discussion. So, like I mentioned, the way I want to go about our class today is the reading is split up into different excerpts. And so what we're going to do is we'll read each one and then I'll pose some questions and we'll have some reactions and discussions, and we'll do that for each one. Okay. Now, does Rabbi Laila usually have you all join in the reading and read different paragraphs, or does she read? She reads? Okay, so great. So I don't mind reading unless you guys feel moved to read. I don't mind sharing.
And you tell us the page.
And I will tell you the page, of course.
And if we don't have the book.
And if you don't have the book, I have this for you. Fran, do you also need a packet? No. Oh, you have the book. Okay, awesome.
Here you go.
Of course.
I'm curious.
Oh, it's for you. Okay, so we are starting on page 165 in the book. 165. Yeah. Okay. I will start reading. A few years ago, I was asked to speak in front of a group of Israeli high school seniors at the opening of their Israeli diaspora seminar, a recent addition to the curriculum designed to strengthen the bonds between Israelis and world Jewry. Sponsored by Israel's Ministry of Education with financial support from North American Philanthropy, this initiative has been gaining momentum in direct correlation to spiking anxiety about how strained relations between Israel and much of diaspora Jewry have become. As I began to talk about Judaism's Genesis covenant, the broad-based loyalty to the Jewish people, its demands, and its implications for the idea of Israel as the homeland of the Jewish people, and not just Israeli Jews, I felt the lecture hitting its stride. I was even more charming and funny than usual, and my expository remarks were illustrated by colorful personal anecdotes. The students, however, sitting slouched in their chairs, yawning overtly, did not seem to share my enthusiasm. Fair enough. I upped my game, modulated my voice, tapped deeper into my own authentic passion for the subject, and nothing. Here, let me get you a packet, Dory.
Wait, that's a walk up a little bit.
Here you go.
Thank you.
Of course. Being an experienced lecturer, I stopped the lecture. Turning to the students, I asked directly, "Does this topic interest you?" No answer. I continued, "Whoever is interested in this topic, please raise your hand." Not one hand went up. I have to say, I personally have had that experience with my 7th and 9th graders, where I stopped the lecture and said, "Is anybody listening? Is anybody paying attention?" So I can commiserate with Donniel. I was taken aback. This was an elite school renowned for academic excellence, intellectual inquiry, social responsibility, and pluralism. A large percentage of the student body had direct familial roots in North America and traveled there often. This wasn't a student body for whom diaspora Jewry and Judaism was an alien phenomenon. "Why don't you care?" I asked. A student raised his hand and answered, "Why should I care? My family chose to make Aliyah. My aunts, uncles, and cousins chose not to, even though they could. Beyond my family connection, why should they be important to me as an Israeli? Let them make Aliyah. and then I will care. In front of me was a group of self-confident Israelis raised in a powerful and successful Israel who had never known anything else. They did not need the diaspora and had no language with which to even think about why they should care about it. So I heard some wows. I had some similar reactions. I'd love to, before we go into the different excerpts, the different topics, I'd love to first stop and pause and ask for initial reactions. What did this provoke in you? What did this stir? Surprise, yeah. And if you're online, please just raise your hand and I'd love to have you in the conversation as well. Rory.
When was this written?
You mentioned that you have 7th and 9th graders. This is like typical, I mean, some of it is typical with people who have cell phones and this and that. And some of it I think is just typical of being in, like, not even high school, but like middle school, 7th, 8th, 9th graders. And I don't know when this was written, but clearly it was probably written before, way before 10, 7. So.
2023.
Okay.
It was published.
It was published, so it was written before.
Right. Yeah. So
So,
this lecture took place definitely before October 2nd.
right, so I'm not surprised by the students and even in graduate school, I'm not surprised on any given day that you won't see 10 or 12. You have a class that maybe 20, 30 kids, then you won't see 10 or 12 of them like this on the desk, even in graduate school, so. Just saying, I'm not surprised, and the thing with, they didn't make Aliyah, that's like a family dynamic there.
Yeah.
I can't say it's everyone's dynamic, I think it's someone's family's dynamic, yeah.
Thank you. Yes, Alan.
Unbelievable hubris.
Unbelievable what?
Hubris. It's the attitude that the entire world has about Israelis. That they think it's only them. They don't understand, and this is generalism, they don't understand the need for friends.
Mhm.
That's it.
Thank you. Yes, that's it.
I've only been introduced to Israelis who were deeply care and know the United States. And, you know, the world. But what I really hear here is not so much they have hubris, which they do, or they need to respect that what they do impacts all of us, which it definitely does. But I also think they're lacking history. They forget that there are moments in history where the world Jewry has had to come to Israel's defense, not the other way around. And even today, we've come to Israel's defense in the United States quite a bit more in the past few years than ever before that in these people's lives.
Mhm.
So as much as I respect their opinions and their ability to say, well, we made Aliyah, they didn't. Yeah, that's right, but you're gonna need us someday, and they just did. I think not one of those kids today would say the same thing. I think they would all be grateful there's a world Jewry out there that's deeply connected to Israel.
Interesting. So yeah. So what I hear you saying, and I think, which is why I also chose this chapter to speak about, because I think that it's very relevant, especially with everything that's going on in our world between Israel and the diaspora, what just happened in Australia, and everything's still happening in Israel and around the world. I think it's very relevant. And so to have this discussion amidst all of these events, we're going to get into the history. So you'll get to touch on that. 2 more and then we'll move on. Yes, Maddie.
I think there's a disconnection, and maybe it's because of the history of disconnection. And I think that during the time of their awareness growing up, there was a lot of isolation. Because the world has, by and large, not responded to Israel, or maybe not in the way they wanted. You know, we've had a lot of presidents who were very lukewarm in regard to Israel. So they feel that, I believe they have to depend on themselves.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
This was college students,
Yes.
Seniors.
Seniors in high school.
and would the American college students be as interested in Israel?
Great question. What do you think?
No.
The Jewish ones.
I think that age is just self-absorbed, and that's just my opinion. And my son's not so far away from that age, and I can just say. And he was in NEFTY and everything, he was very pro-Israel, but I would say my son. Could have been very self-absorbed at that time.
Mhm. I do believe that there is a distinction post October 7th. I'm trying to think prior to October 7th, when I was teaching religious school, I vaguely remember having a conversation about Israel with high school students. And I do remember one of them making a comment similar. Why should I care about what happens all the way in Israel? It's so far away from me. It doesn't affect me. I don't know anyone that lives there. Why do I have to know about Israel? And I'll tell you, unfortunately, that is the opinion of a lot of young Jews these days, which is, I'm so happy in my Judaism where I live. I feel good about it. I'm proud of it. Why do we always have to talk about Israel? Why can't we have more of a focus on our Judaism that we have here? So I think that this idea, this push and pull, and this comparing and judging, I think that it's kind of rooted in our history, which we're gonna dive into. So let's move on. Anyone online want to say anything? I don't want to leave you guys out before we move on. No? Okay. So we are going to move on to the first topic. Inadequate partners. Zionism's rejection of diasporic Judaism. We are on page 166. Let me move this. Okay. Do you want me to zoom in for the people online? Yeah. And just if I don't move it, just someone yell out and remind me, okay?
Can I just make a comment?
Yeah.
I find it interesting that there are people in this congregation that don't support Israel. And how is it that, we're worried about kids that are self-absorbed, that are not even, their mindset is not thinking about that, but no one's talking about all of the grown adults who are here that don't really support and think of Israel because they're over there and we're over here.
Right. You make a good point. It isn't just young adults, children. It's everyone. Everybody can definitely have that element of being self-absorbed and only caring about the events that are directly affecting them on their day-to-day basis. 100%. So I'm gonna read, and you can follow along. 166. Much has been discussed over the last decade regarding the weakening of North American Jewry's commitment to Israel, especially among the younger generation. But very little has been written about Israel's attitude toward diaspora Jewry or its responsibility for the deterioration of the relationship. The historical and intellectual founders of Zionism are predicated on the notion that Jewish life can never truly thrive outside of Israel. In modern Hebrew, the word is divided into two: Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, and Hutz La'aretz, outside the land. In rabbinic discourse, this division stems from legal distinction between the way one has to treat produce grown in the land of Israel and produce grown elsewhere. The continued use of this terminology in modern Hebrew is the product of a Zionist Israel-centric consciousness in which Israel is the center of the Jewish world. This attitude, which might be best described as a dismissive contempt, is embedded in most Zionist narratives going back to their inception. As Zionists campaigned to chart a new path for the Jewish people, they did so in part by rejecting both the physical and spiritual viability of Jewish life outside of a Jewish sovereign state. From the earliest years of the state, those who moved to Israel were referred to as olim, ascenders, while those who left were referred to as yordim, literally descenders. A group Yitzhak Rabin once famously compared to the droppings of insects. While the original Zionist dream of Israel as the homeland of the Jewish people, not merely of Israelis or Israeli Jews, was predicated on a familial bond with world Jewry, from the early days of the state, it became clear that this core bond entailed a sense of Genesis-based obligation toward diaspora Jewry, but no Genesis-informed tolerance or respect for diaspora Jewry's Exodus commitments. For the average Israeli dati and not dati alike, that means religious or not religious, only Israeli Exodus Judaism had validity and significance. So I'm going to pause, and before we go into the discussion questions, I want to name something. A lot of this chapter, what we're going to read, is going to feel really uncomfortable for us. It's going to feel like it's kind of coming at us, right? We're going to feel it personally because it's talking to us. It's calling us out as living in the diaspora and not living in Israel. And I want to invite us to have a lens of not moving away from the personal and trying to really have an understanding of how this even came to be. So move away from the personal. Of course, we can have our reactions, and I want to hear those reactions. I'm not telling you not to have those guttural reactions, but I invite us to really try to understand how this came to be, why this is the case, how we can actually move forward in a way that's not aligned with these sentiments, okay? So my first question I open up to you guys is, what language or idea here made you either feel uncomfortable or made you feel seen? Which idea in the text that we just read made you feel a little uncomfortable or made you feel seen?
Dissenters dropping stuff in text. It's really, a graphic description of how he feels about the rest of us.
Right. Yeah.
You said this was written in 2023.
Yes, but that actual quote is from Yitzhak Rabin, a group from Yitzhak Rabin, which he was in the 1970s.
How is it relevant today?
He's bringing in historical context. Sensing.
I think it just means we have more work to do.
Yeah.
We as American Jews have to bridge the gap, not just by going to Israel and donating and helping and planting trees, but also by advocating for Israel here at home. And Israeli Jews need to, unfortunately, be educated the hard way that they need the diaspora Jews to protect them in a lot of ways from the rest of the world that will happily cast them aside.
Yeah, Dory.
Hey,
Dory and then Maddie.
Maddie knows this person. I went to Greece with a Jewish trip, and our leader, this was after 10/7, was he met her, and he grew up, let's say, in the United States and made Aliyah, and he lives in Israel. And he had once said to us that Israelis only wanted Trump because they felt like God forbid Biden or then Kamala Harris won, that they would be abandoned. And he said they're very short-sighted because they're only thinking about Israel, not about how people are in all the rest of the world. And then his comment was, Biden never, as much as we could say whatever we wanted, he never didn't give Israel anything they asked for when things were going on. And also the same with Ukraine. Like, yes, they debated, but he never did give them the weapons. And I think for Israelis, they're the ones with the people on the line. We're not. We're donating money, and yes, they need our money. Yes, they need our support. Yes, the minute this thing happened on 10/7, someone donated the largest thing in Israeli bond history, right? The biggest donation or biggest bonds ever bought, like $1.5 million, went the next day. But I think for Israelis, they're the ones on the, they're the ones fighting Hamas. They're the ones fighting Iran. They're the ones who are sending their kids off. And for them, and you're right, they do need us. And they've always needed us, right? We've always bought their bonds, right? We've always backed them up.
It's more than financial though.
Yeah.
We educate other Americans, like evangelicals, on why Israel's important, not just religiously, but on why secular, who cares about the religious kind of people in America, the security partnership we have, We are the reason they have a defense industry that's so closely connected to the US. We're the reason they have supply chains with the US. We're the reason they have such free trade. And those are things that build Israel, so it's not just financial.
No, I agree with you, but also look at the country of Australia when that happened, right? Their government, and you're right, their government basically denied Israel. They're saying, screw you, we're not having any relations with you. That was an 80-year relationship that they had. You know, so, you know, ever since the beginning of Israel, right? And Israel also gives a lot of great stuff, WhatsApp and Waze and all these other things that didn't just happen in the United States, but I'm saying that they are, and I don't blame them for being so Israeli centric, because if you were just, you know, I think anyone who's been to Israel, when people say the West Bank, no one knows where the West, everyone thinks it's the Colorado River. They don't realize the West Bank is where we are, and the West Bank is where Deerfield Beach is. You know, you go over that little bridge, and there's the West Bank. So I think so many people don't realize geographically where things are, but I have to say that sometimes they're gonna be so short-sighted because everyone around them is, you know, people in New York City have 20 blocks, right? We don't have 20 blocks on our doors. We
Yeah.
might have two, right?
Thank you, Dory. Yeah, it's important also. What I love about a group of people in a learning situation is we get all different perspectives, so thank you.
Yeah.
Maddie,
I related to the sentence on a familial bond and the ideal
what page
that
is this on?
it's on page 167 on the top.
Okay.
And that,
You wanna read the
Remind-
sentence?
what?
Will you read the whole sentence for the group?
Yeah, while the original Zionist dream of Israel as the homeland of the Jewish people, and not merely of Israelis or Israeli Jews, was predicated on a familial bond with world Jewry. From the early days of state, it became clear that this core bond entailed a sense of Genesis-based obligation toward diaspora Jewry, but no Genesis-informed tolerance or respect for diaspora Jewry Exodus commitments. So I think as in real families, the parents or the people who are central to the family want everybody to get along, especially siblings, the two parts that are different. But sometimes there is resentment.
Mhm.
You know, one part, maybe the Israelis believe they're carrying more of the burden
Mhm.
and taking more of the hardships. And while it's easy to give money, they're giving their lives
Mhm.
and sacrificing their way of life.
Mhm.
And you know, it's like, yes, we have talk, but where's the action behind the talk?
Maddie, I think that's a great point that you bring up and a great thing to dive into, this idea of family, right? I know personally, my dad lived both of my dad's parents are now passed away, but he lived in Florida where my bubby lived. And his brothers, one lived in Oregon, the other one lived in Rhode Island. And so the burden of taking care and the joy, right? Like both, it fell on him, right? And he would get frustrated. He would say, why am I the only one, you know, always running to the hospital? Why am I the only one financially always taking care of her? Why am I, right? And so if we think of it in that metaphorical way, there is some truth to that, right? As a young student in high school, I was really eager, believe it or not, I really wanted to go to the IDF. I went to sessions for preparing. I almost went. I was very close. And it all came from this place of a little guilt. Like, why is it okay for people my age that are Jewish, just like I am, have to now at this age go put their life on the line to protect me, essentially, and the entire Jewish people. And I loved Israel at that time, just like I still do. And for them, if I love Israel, shouldn't I also have to protect it? Right? Why is it just on them? Right? And so I resonate with that idea very much so. And so as we see here, it's very complicated. And I will say, I think that after October 7th, there's been a shift in understanding. And I think Israel has actually become very aware. There's many headlines, I don't know if you've also seen them, of this idea that Israel now has a sixth front of the war. And that front is diaspora Judaism, because they're seeing the attacks that are happening. And for the first time, Israeli Jews are concerned for us, right? And so we are seeing a shift. And so I think that it's interesting, like I said, to read this chapter in the face of what's happening today. Spencer.
I wrote that sixth front, that idea, I wrote it into my thesis paper in May 24.
Nice.
Yeah.
Fortune teller. All right, Alan, and then we're gonna move forward. Yes.
I actually can understand why, a lot of Israeli people, have problems with diaspora. And because they're fighting for their own state or their survival, so I can understand, although you say it's perhaps changing, but I can understand, even if it doesn't totally shift into a more, even-handed approach, I can understand their underlying beliefs from it.
Yeah, and I have one more story before we move forward. I was speaking with this organization called Achim L'Chaim. It's called Brothers for Life. And this idea is that it's injured soldiers who are taken into a community so that they don't feel so alone with the experience that they've been through. And the hope is that they go on trips around the world. I think Temple Bethel had a similar trip here called Seeds of Peace, right? And so it's very similar to that. But I was recently speaking to them and they said that the list of soldiers in need has just grown astronomically after October 7th. And I'll tell you firsthand, being in Israel this past summer and then in October, I have been shocked by how many people on the street that I see that are amputees, that are crutches, that are injured. And it's become so normal in the streets of Israel to see that. And so what my friend who works at this organization was telling me is that the importance of them coming abroad to Jewish communities is so crucial right now. Because in Israel, they're seen as just another citizen who acted in times of war because that's what you had to do. And there's nothing special about what they did. It's just what they had to do. And when they come abroad, they're looked at as heroes. And for the first time, they're given meaning and purpose to what they did and how important it was, what they did for the Jewish people.
But everybody has a different level of Judaism.
Mhm.
If you've grown up in a family or in a household that is a religious household, and that's what you know, then that's what you're going to become. If you grow up in Israel, that is the land.
Mhm.
The attitude is different. Whereas here, our attitude is different. There are people, like if you go to Hasid people, they don't even consider me being Jewish.
Right.
But their commitment is different than my commitment to Judaism.
Mhm.
So it depends upon what side of the fence you're standing on.
Yeah.
And where you belong as far as how you were raised
Mhm.
and what you do things.
Yeah.
I just don't think you can you can't say that, all the Jews should band together because we aren't together as one group. We're many different sects in one religion.
I love that because that's something I wholeheartedly believe, that we're just born into what we're born into, right? We look at Orthodox Jews sometimes and we really disagree with some of the stuff that they do. And then I pull the curtain back and I say, well, we can't blame them a lot. I mean, certain things, right? But that's what they were brought into. That's all they know, right? Just like this is all we know. And they look at that like it's crazy. It's what you're brought into. And unless you're able to really go beyond and open up the curtain and look past it, which a lot of them are incapable of doing because of the constraints that are put on the community, there's a lot of truth to that, for sure. And I just want to note that Tara wrote in here, On Rabbi Ashir's theme, my mother left her native Ireland in 1964 at age 18. In 1987, my grandma had a major heart attack and my mom flew to Dublin, and the time she arrived, my grandma died. My aunts were like, "Oh, now you come? We took care of her, but you left." So very similar theme to what I mentioned about my grandma. Thanks for sharing, Tara.
But that, again, that's on geography. There's always a child that stays behind. And there's another child that goes and has their own life. And a child that stays close to the parents. That child is the child that's gonna take the responsibility.
Totally.
Exactly what's happening in.
And that's what we all are. We were all born, I mean, maybe not all of us, but for the most part, we were born here. We were born, just like we were born into it, right? Many of us didn't choose to live here over Israel. As we get older, we can consciously make that decision for ourselves. But at the end of the day, we were born here. We weren't given a decision. People in Israel, they were born in Israel. They weren't given the decision, right? You were not born here. Let's move on. There's such good stuff in here, so I want to make sure we continue. Okay.
His sister lives in Israel.
Yeah.
To
But
be
she
fair,
also says that when people start talking and giving advice, like the family in Chile said, wait a second. You don't know what we're going through in Israel to survive, especially after October 7th.
Right.
So she gets very angry also.
Right. So you're able to notice it firsthand,
Yep.
the relationship between Israel and, yeah.
to be
Thanks.
fair to
Yep.
Liliana though, when it was the time for her to move to the States, there was no guarantee Israel would still be there a couple of decades later, so.
Yeah.
It's not like she had the option to go.
55 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, so we move on. Corpse, vagrant, beggar, dog. World Jewry through Israel's eyes. At the foundation of Zionist ideology lie the belief that the diaspora was unworthy of respect as it destroyed the Jew in both body and soul. In the words of some of the movement's most prominent early thinkers, only a dog neither has nor wants a home. A man who chooses to live his whole life as a transient without a thought for the establishment of a permanent home for his children will forever be regarded as a dog. Among the living nations of the earth, the Jews as a nation are long since dead, the ghost-like apparition of a living corpse. To the living, the Jew is a corpse. To the native, a foreigner. To the homesteader, a vagrant. To the proprietor, a beggar. To the poor, an exploiter and a millionaire. To the patriot, a man without a country. For all, a hated rival. The Judaism of Galut, meaning exile or diaspora, is not worthy of survival. The Galut is corrupting our human character and dignity. I'm going to pause there because that was a lot to digest. Very harsh, in my opinion. What are some of your reactions?
I guess it's a question of historical versus current. In history, that's 100% right. We were never welcomed anywhere, no matter what. We were tolerated. And I think up until recently, we felt in the United States, at least, that we were part of this. We weren't just tolerated, or, if there was anti-Semitism, it was a small thing, or whatever it was. I think that we still, what do we think of ourselves as first? Do we think of ourselves as Jews first, or do we think of ourselves as Americans first? I think in history, nobody in Russia who was Jewish felt Russian. They felt Jewish living in Russia.
They weren't in Russia, they were in Japan.
Well, they were in Poland, Russia. My father was in
Hold on. I want Alan to finish. Hold on.
My father was born, he had a Russian parent, he had a Russian birth certificate, and he emigrated from Poland. So I get it, I understand it, okay? But the point is that you were in Poland, you still didn't think Polish, and you thought you were Jewish. In France, you certainly didn't think you were French.
Right.
So I think, but today, people, I think even now, people don't think of themselves as Jews first, they think of themselves as Americans first.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see how that's maybe shifting with everything going on right now. Yes,
This, your comment about American or Jewish.
Not org. It's, what do you think of this first?
Okay, but you're a son, you're a husband, you're a father, which, you're equal. You're all those things that you can't think of.
Father.
I would tend to say, if you ask 100 people, what do you think of first?
American.
I think you'll get American before you get Jewish.
Yeah,
I also think that it depends on our stages in life, right? When your kids were younger, father took more precedence, right? Whereas maybe now, husband is taking, I think like as experiences shape our lives, our roles, right? Like I said, right now, with everything going on in the world, me being a Jew is kind of pushing forward, and being an American is kind of pushing behind, right? But before October 7th, America was up here and Jew was behind here, right? And so I think that our experiences shift our roles in society. Hold on, right, let's have, raise your hand if you want to speak so I can make sure everyone gets a voice. Yes.
I grew up in a little town. And I always saw myself as Jewish, but you don't talk about it in American. But that's the way I grew up. I knew I was American, but I knew that the Jewish part was seen by people and it wasn't good.
Mhm.
So it's interesting, I'm discovering that, I don't know how that affected me. It didn't, but again, we were a strong, small Jewish community, but I grew up with prejudice and expecting that people were not like Jews.
Right, Sylvie, you had your hand up.
No.
No? Okay, okay. Anyone else that hasn't spoken?
Yes.
You-
no.
Okay.
I was gonna say, they were.
Why are you comparing nationality to religion?
I am.
It isn't.
Well, why? It's not the same thing. It's not a fair question because you can't compare the two.
I'm not.
If you were to ask me what religion I am, I would say I'm Jewish. If you were to ask me what my nationality is, if I was born in Israel, I would be Israeli. If I
All I
was,
said was put 100, put 10 things on a list.
yeah,
Put 10 things on a list, American, Jewish, father, husband, whatever. What do you think of first? Well, you might think of husband first. I don't think many people out of 100 would say Jewish first
Right.
versus all the others. That's all, and they're different.
It's also,
One's a role,
it's a-
one's a role,
Yeah.
their roles, their religions, their personalities, they're all different things.
also, I think there's a lot of historical context in this conversation. In a lot of countries in history, Jews haven't been able to have the identity of the country because they weren't seen as full citizens. And so they weren't able to say, I am German. They only could say,
we're talking now.
Well, no, I'm talking,
but this is a historical,
this is historical.
the excerpt that we just read is historical, so that's why this conversation started from the
Yes, that
beginning.
sounds.
Spencer,
I would absolutely say that pre-October 7th, but post Charlottesville, I was probably big. Now I recognize I'm Jewish, and I really do think my odds of dying in the United States peacefully at old age are very low right now. I'm not sure I'm going to be safe here till I'm 80 or 90. And so
Where are you gonna be safe?
I don't know. But I can tell you I'm not sure it's gonna be the United States anymore. When I was born and when I was young, maybe, not today. And so unfortunately, I think I've been forced in the past few years to recognize I might have to be Jewish first at some point.
all right, let's move forward. So we're gonna continue reading where it says Israel was not merely the place. The bottom of 167. Israel was not merely the place where Jews would find a homeland. It was the place where Judaism and the Exodus covenant would be renewed and restored in the form of a robust Jewish cultural vanguard. Ahad Ha'am had already posited the notion that without a cultural center, Jewish life outside of Israel would become atrophied. Judaism can no longer tolerate the galut form, which it had to take on, in obedience to its will to live when it was exiled from its own country. But without that form, its life is in danger. So it seeks to return to its historic center. Then, from this center, the spirit of Judaism will radiate to the great circumference to all the communities of the diaspora to inspire them with new life and to preserve the overall unity of our people. Diasporic existence threatened the Jewish soul and needed a Judaism produced in a Jewish center, a renaissance that would inspire Jews all around the world. That said, Ahad Ha'am viewed the idea of a sovereign Jewish state for all Jews as impractical and assumed Jews would have to continue to live in the diaspora. But once the idea of Jewish sovereignty captured the imagination of Zionist thinkers, the diaspora was reclassified as a place of inevitable spiritual death. Galut, diaspora, can only drag out the disgrace of our people and sustain the existence of a people disfigured in body and soul. The galut is corrupting our human character and dignity, for Zionism is an aspiration toward morality and beauty. It has come as one of its chief purposes to redeem the man in us. This is the very curse of the galut, that our undertakings do not, indeed cannot, prosper. Through cruel and bitter trials and tribulations, we have slowly arrived at the realization that without a tangible homeland, without private national premises that are entirely ours, we can have no sort of life, either material or spiritual. For the mainstream Zionists, the homeland of the Jews was the only place where Judaism could be safe. With the Jewish people connected to the land, responsible for their own destiny, and free from the assimilationist pull of being a minority in someone else's home, the Exodus covenant would reinvent itself and be revitalized. All this is unattainable in the diaspora. As a result of growing assimilation and the fragmentation of Jewish soul in the diaspora, we are increasingly aware that only in Israel can a Jew live a full life, both as Jew and as a human being. In Israel, the Jewish-Israeli identity has to contend with all the elements of life via the binding and sovereign framework of territorially defined state. And therefore, the extent of its reach into life is immeasurably fuller and broader and more meaningful than the Jewishness of the American Jew. So I have a few questions to kind of spark conversation so that we can frame our reactions. So my first question is, what does Ahad Ha'am's vision succeed and fall short? Where does Ahad Ha'am's vision succeed and fall short? So if you want to go back to the beginning of his, it's on the top of page 168. So I'm wondering, where does his vision succeed and where does it fall short? Take a look at the paragraph.
I can see where it succeeds.
Okay.
In paragraph 2, from about halfway through, then from this center, the spirit of Judaism will radiate to great circumference to all communities of the diaspora to inspire them with new life and to preserve the overall unity of our people. That's true. And the proof, I think, is the World Zionist Congress where you represent us. No doubt the fact that that is still going, even after Israel was created, and giving the Jewish people so much influence on even Israel and the world Jewry, even though there is a center. I think that was such a strong and brilliant statement by the original Zionists, who some of whom obviously agree with some of what's in this book, some of whom not. But it very clearly worked out, because I think we are a more connected people globally than when there were German Jews and French Jews and Polish Jews, all of them suffered terrible fates. But now we're all connected, saying if Israel's there, maybe we don't start for those fates.
So I guess my question is, what if there was no Israel? What if Israel hadn't been formed? I think that's the question that's posited here. And I'm not sure what we've got, you know, it's hard.
What do you think? I think that's a question we can all grapple with.
I think you know, the hypothetical is a very difficult one.
Yeah.
Because we all grown up with it. But I think we would, I really don't know, I think there would be either more assimilation. Or maybe both assimilation and more persecution.
Mhm.
I'm not sure what the world would have done to us, or what we would have done without.
Yeah. I also will say between undergrad and rabbinical school, my job full-time was a birthright Israel coordinator. So I worked on college campus, University of Texas, and I would recruit students on campus and I would fill up, 2 or 3 buses of 40 kids on each bus. And every winter and summer, I would take them to Israel and lead them on this trip. And then afterwards, I would follow up with them to try to keep them engaged. And this idea that Ahad Ha'am is talking about was proved through that experience. Because these were kids that previously had no connection to their Judaism. Grew up, with Jewish parents, Jewish family, maybe they went to religious school, but I wouldn't say they ever came to Hillel or they ever were interested in getting more knowledge or education or social activity with Judaism. But you bet, after that birthright trip, the percentage of return from those students that started to take on leadership positions in Hillel and started to be more involved into coming to events and learning, it grew astronomically. And so I do think there is definitely something to Ahad Ha'am's idea of Israel being a central force.
You were good at your job, too, I remember.
I think there needs to be a symbiotic relationship. We need Israel. Israel needs the Jews outside of Israel. The birthright was a way to establish this first-hand connection. What I think Israelis don't realize is that we are such a secular society that being Jewish is a piece of it. It takes a huge amount of work and commitment in a family, in a community, to raise children who feel attached in a way.
Yeah.
It's really huge.
It's really hard, yeah.
So I think those programs are vital.
Yeah.
But also we have to have expectations that life is very different. I think you mentioned something about wanting to separate religion and, what did you say?
Nationality.
Nationality. I think the idea is identity. If we could put as a priority being a Jew on the rungs of identity, that would be very helpful.
Why can't you say you're an American Jew? Why does it have to be one or the other?
Yeah.
It's not one or the other, but people identify.
You can say that now.
What do you like? One people identify as their career. Why? Because that's what they're immersed in.
Yeah.
So there's so much now, unfortunately, misinformation.
Yeah.
And AI is, you have to educate people on AI.
Yeah.
I can't believe it.
So an example of your comments before about the difference between being a Jew here versus being a Jew in Israel. I'll give an example. A lot of my Israeli friends at firsthand have a really difficult time understanding that being a rabbi is my full-time job. Because not in a rude way, it's a lack of understanding. Because in Israel, I say I work at a synagogue, which is in Hebrew, it's like a Beit Knesset, okay? And for them, a Beit Knesset is just the place that people go to pray. That's it. That is it. And so when I say it's my full-time job, they're like, are you praying all day, every day? Like, what else are you doing at your Beit Knesset? And then I explained to them, I'm like, no, you don't understand. This the place of Judaism for a lot of people. This is the central hub. It's much more than a place to come to pray. Half of the people don't even come here to pray. They come here for other reasons.
Yeah.
And so in Israel, their synagogues, they only need them for prayer because they have ways of experiencing Judaism all around them every day, all day. Just by going to the market on a Friday, you get to hear everybody exchange Shabbat Shalom.
Yeah.
Right? Just by waking up on a Friday morning, you know it's a holy day because you have to get all your groceries and everything done before everything closes. Right? You know when holidays are happening because your school is closed, your work is closed. You can't travel to see a friend on that day, right? And so it's so different. And so at the end of the day, it is this understanding of, rather than judging, it's understanding, seeking to understand. Yes.
In Chile, also temple you only went to pray. The social activities for Jewish people was the different institutions, right? And also when I say I'm going to temple to the classes, what do you mean? You know, it's the same mental. But my question is, do you feel that Jews, since Israel exists, are more safe and are more respected?
Me personally? Yes. Yes, I do. I think that to have our own country and to have our own army, I think that it does give a sense of respect, an automatic earned respect. That we operate, that we have our own society, that we have our own laws, that we have our own people, that we participate in world games and world conversations, that we have a seat at the table, I think gives us that automatic respect. I think the safety question is difficult because as much as I think Israel makes us more safe, I think there are many ways that actually we are more unsafe also. So I think it comes with both. But I definitely do believe that the safety outweighs the unsafety. But it's definitely an interesting debate to have, especially in today's world. Let's just read the last section. We have 4 minutes, so I just want you at least to hear the last section. And then we'll close out.
Okay.
There's actually 2 more sections, but I want us to read a new Israeli. So let's skip to, it's the last section. It is on page 173. To end a little bit on a more positive note. So 173.
173.
Right? Yeah, 173. Okay. A new Israeli, North American partnership and the Exodus Covenant. When liberal Jews engage Genesis and Exodus in a healthy, self-correcting dialogue, the Exodus Covenant is immunized against denominational monopolization and expands to contain the ideas and values of most Jews who claim it as their birthright. When diverse notions of the Exodus Covenant are open to tolerating, engaging, and learning from each other, advancement in the realm of Exodus itself becomes possible. Secular and liberal Israeli Jewish approaches to Exodus Judaism can benefit immensely from engaging with their North American counterparts and vice versa. Secular and liberal Israeli Judaism, mirrored in a non-dati identity, a non-religious identity, have much to learn from North American liberal Jewish denominations, which have spent over a century synthesizing Judaism with modernity. Democracy, human rights, environment, attitudes towards the non-Jew, pluralism, gender sensitivity, racial justice. In Israel, these issues are generally perceived as part of a universal, as distinct from Jewish discourse. One of North American Judaism's innovative attributes is an interpretive engagement that rereads the Jewish traditions such that modern universal values have become an integral part of Judaism and its values, a major contribution to Jewish self-understanding. From the hegemony of orthodoxy, Jewish rituals have also been rewritten and innovated in ways that better speak to a secular and liberal consciousness. For too many secular and liberal Israeli Jews, the synagogue they do not go to is Orthodox. They do not want to be Orthodox and therefore have no synagogue to go to. The challenge that North American Judaism places before Israelis is to build a synagogue they would want to be a part of. Genesis Zionism's challenge to Israel is to free itself from a zero-sum Shoah-Tecuma dichotomy. When Israel becomes Jewish pluralism's greatest advocate and no longer its most zealous and antagonist, it will not only strengthen the world Jewry-Israel relationship, but open up possibilities for a new renaissance in Israeli Exodus Judaisms. Then, liberal Israeli Jews, like the counterparts around the world, will no longer tolerate a single rabbinate alien to their Jewish values. They will insist on a marriage and conversion process that reflects their religious sensibilities. They will demand funded hours for their children's Judaic study with a curriculum that reflects their vision of the Exodus covenant. And they will bring their B'nai and Binot mitzvah to the liberal Kotel, now resurrected, because they clamored for it and welcomed their children into a covenant that represents their own deepest commitments and aspirations as Jews. North American liberal Jewish sensibilities have already influenced Israeli Exodus Judaism. For example, on issues of pluralism, gender, and gay rights, but Israelis rarely acknowledge this indebtedness. When Israelis not only recognize but celebrate the contribution of diasporic Judaism to Israeli life, they will take major steps towards fulfilling their Zionist aspirations to the Tekuma of Israel, not merely as a home for the Jews, but a Jewish home for all Jews. And I think that ends the chapter. So right at 1 o'clock, I don't want to keep you over, but I thought that was a great way to kind of end the session, to show that as much as there's this historical, back and forth, at the end of the day, it really is vital and necessary to have this back and forth symbiotic relationship between our two societies. It was so great learning with you all. Thank you so much. Happy Hanukkah. Happy third night.